Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. So today we have a special guest, the brother Obsidian, and we're going to be talking about this whole Pookie and Ray Ray situation, the whole Pookie and Ray Ray compromise that this brother has proposed. So it should be an engaging dialogue. This is going to be an interview format. It's not going to be like a debate where we go back and forth, but I'm sure there are going to be moments where we have disagreements and we talk about those. But for the most part, this is not going to be a confrontational dialogue or anything. It's going to be more of a conversation so that we can hear exactly what Obsidian points of view are on this particular subject. So to start off, I'll just have the brother Obsidian introduce himself, let the people know what your channel is all about, what's the purpose behind your channel. So take it away, Obsidian.
Yeah, my name is Mumi Obsidian Ali. I'm a blogger, podcaster, talk radio show host, and my show is called Obsidian Radio, and it can be heard on right here on YouTube, Obsidian Radio, the live stream show channel. Heard every morning, usually at 9 a.m. Sometimes I'll come on the air on the weekends or on off peak hours, so to speak. I just got finished doing an impromptu show, started at 5 o'clock and just ended it before coming over here. The purpose of the show, the byline is the voice of the everyday brother, and it really is a kind of response to what Black women have been saying in the white mainstream and what I refer to as Black vagina vision media for more than 3 decades, about Black men, about relationships, about families, about politics. So that's what my show does. It's a response to Black women, and it's a lot of humor, and some would say potty humor, if you will. And it's done in a way that appeals to guys, but quite a few women listen as
Okay.
well, and we have a pretty
All
good
right.
time.
So now I understand that you have been using these terms Pookie and Ray Ray. So can we start out by defining, who is Pookie, who is Ray Ray, and what do you basically mean when you use that terminology?
Yeah, I didn't make up that term. That term had been around before I came along. I just kind of appropriated the term to kind of be a kind of catch-all phrase for a certain segment of Black men. The Pookie and Ray Ray debate, as it has become known in recent years, I've defined it in this way. It's a response to Black women who have complained over the years, before and after the advent of social media, about the inadequacy, incompetency, lack of ambition, lack of integrity, and so on the part of Black men that they had gotten romantically involved with. Oftentimes, they reproduced with these men and got and had children with them. And the way that Black women would present the debate was as if all Black men ain't shit. And my response was, wait a minute, hold on a second. We got to make some distinctions here. The Black men that you have problems with are of a certain type. They don't represent Black men like me, or for that matter, Black men like you. New possibilities. I am saying to them, A, you have to make distinctions. B, the Black men you're talking about are of a certain stripe and type, and not me, and not new possibilities. And C, if you want a different outcome, then you got to choose a different dick. It really is that simple. That's it.
Yeah. So you gave some allusion to like who Pookie and Ray Ray are, but can you like break it down? Like, what do you mean when you say Pookie and Ray Ray? What is the common definition, and what do those terms usually mean when people use that term?
Well, there's a lot of different terms. Tommy Sotomayor uses the term the Madden King. slackers, guys who are kind of sketchy, irresponsible, incompetent, usually not ambitious, um, immature, that sort of type.
Now, I wanted to know, like, why is this an issue that's very important to you? Because I know that it's an issue that you have talked about on numerous occasions. You've done like, live streams that go for hours. Like you've done, I saw one, well, part of one, which went for 8 hours. And I know that you probably usually do your shows for that long, but why is this such an important issue to you? Why do you think that this is something that has to be discussed on social media?
Well, I mean, personally, because I got tired of black women refusing to take personal responsibility for the kinds of men that they like to fuck and suck and reproduce with. B, because I got tired of being scapegoated by these black women. And I just got tired of it. And I was able to identify a market of black men who felt like me. We're tired of it. It's about time black women, for who this applies, and that's a lot, took a good, long, hard look in the mirror at themselves and take personal responsibility for the type of black men that they choose and reproduce with.
So, you often hear.
If I may, I want to respond to Elaine Lloyd, IKYG. I want to respond to her if I could. She says he, meaning me, wants to reach as many black women as possible and convince them to sleep with people like him. Why not? Why would that be so bad?
Yeah, so we'll get it. I want to ask you some questions about that. I'll get into that a little bit later.
I hope you do, because black women themselves do seek out men like me. The problem is, by then, they got too much baggage. Why would I want them now?
Right. So let me ask you this: like, why is this something that concerns you? Because, like, I mean, the first thing I want to know is, like, do you think that most black women choose the Pookies and Ray Rays, as people call them, over, so-called educated guys, or, guys that are hardworking, or the so-called nice guys, or whatever? Do you believe that that's the case? And if so, why do you believe that?
First question, yes. Second question, that question has been answered. I've talked about this numerous times over the past 4 years. There was a really good Essence article in Essence magazine. 2 black female matchmakers were interviewed. They had 20 years of experience between the 2 of them. And they said that they noticed that their non-black female clients chose mates differently than their black female clients. This is Essence. Okay? So remember, this is the upscale magazine for black women. And they said that non-black women chose mates based on character, integrity, earning potential, whereas black female clients chose mates based on height, sexiness, how his body shape is, how handsome he is, how well of a dresser he is, and then they work back to the character and integrity and so forth. And then the relationships almost never work out. So that's your answer.
Okay, so I saw that. I saw that in your letter to Robert Perkins, and we might as well get into that part of it right now. So, with respect to that thing, those particular comments, like focusing on or initially being attracted to somebody based on the way they look is different from somebody being infatuated or being into the Pookie and Ray Ray type of person, because you can have people that look good in all different walks of life.
That's
so
true.
What is your response to that? Because like they may initially be attracted to somebody based on how they look, based on their height and all that kind
That's
of
true.
stuff. And that could be, a doctor or a lawyer or some other professional, or even some working class man that's living a great life could fit all those categories. They could look a certain way and they can pique that person's interest just by their appearance alone. So how do you go from those particular statements made by those black women that I guess that are matchmakers or whatever. How do you go from those statements to saying that most black women prefer the Pookies and Ray Rays?
Well, I'll answer it this way. And first, I want to respond to a listener in the chat room. Mary Israel says, nobody wants you, Obsidian. Well, that's not true. In fact, it's not even true for you because you're here. If you didn't want to listen to me, why are you here? You see, black women eventually figure things out. It's usually, though, when it's too late, when their best selves are no longer, when they're on the way to crashing into the wall. And to answer your other question, the other day I went to a Easter Sunday brunch yesterday, and it was in a very Tony part of my hometown, Philadelphia. Me and my lady friend were the only black couple in attendance. Everybody else white. And of all the white families, no baby mamas, no bastards, families, husbands and wives and children, and in many cases, grandmothers and grandfathers. Now, what I found was all of the guys were from Dork Central, Dockers pants, polo shirts, and all of the women were decked out in their Sunday best dresses. That is living proof 4 years later of that Essence magazine article I just mentioned. White women choose mates on a completely different criteria than black women. For black women, looks is a deal breaker. Yes, you can be a handsome lawyer. Yes, you can be a handsome doctor. But for black women, the handsome comes first. Not for white women. I was the only guy in the place that was literally suited and booted. Only one. And I'm black. All the white guys, Dork Central, Dockers, polo shirts.
Right, but you see the point of my question, though. When I'm saying that you know they're focused on looks, that could apply to anybody, regardless if they're the Pookie and Ray Rays or some professional, so-called educated lame or something like that. So I don't think that alone can make you reach the conclusion that black women prefer the Pookies and Ray Rays. But I wanted to ask you this, like,
well, let me jump in and just answer that real quick.
Okay, sure.
You're right. Not all black women prefer Pookies and Ray Rays, but it's clear that a lot of black women, the majority, prefer superficial traits in men over substantive traits in men. Or if you will, cads over dads. See, what a lot of black women do is the female version of what we talk about in the barbershop. You can't turn a hoe into a housewife. Black men understand that. But see, black women, what they want to do is they want to turn a cad into a dad.
So what do you mean by
cad?
Like,
I'm
not familiar with that term.
A womanizer,
oh,
a womanizer, a lady killer, a conspicuously handsome guy that can have his pick of the ladies. For a lot of black women, and again, this is an Essence magazine. I didn't write it. They didn't check for me, even though I did meet those two black female matchmakers a year later, and they thanked me for talking about this issue because they said it's a major one that black women have to get straight.
So why do you care about these few women these women that choose the Pookies and Ray Rays when there are plenty of women that do not have that kind of preference? Like, you know, as I was listening to Robert Perkins' video, he was talking about like how for some women, one thing may be corny, and for another thing may be corny. And I'm sure, like you mentioned that you were there with your lady friend, and I'm sure you've been with plenty of women and all that kind of stuff. And the women that choose to be with the Pookie and Ray Rays, they haven't prevented you in any way from having relationships with women. So why do you care about who's getting with Pookie and Ray Ray when there are plenty of women that do not have that preference? I mean, you know, I'm an educated man. You know, I never had any problem finding women or being with women, going on dates or approaching women or any of that kind of stuff. So I'm like wondering, why are you concerned about these women that have certain women that have a preference for the Pookies and Ray Rays when there are plenty of women that don't have that preference? I mean, there are plenty of women that would laugh at some guy that fits that Pookie and Ray Ray type of image if they tried to approach them. I know plenty of women like that. So why sweat over what some of these women have as a preference? And that brings me to like this sub question that I want to ask. It's like, why do you care about these women's preferences anyway? Because, for instance, I'm sure you have a preference for the type of woman that you want to be with, like what kind of look she has to have, height or complexion, or, certain physical traits or attributes and stuff like that. We all have certain types of preferences. So if you have a preference, how can you complain about somebody else having a preference?
That's a very good question. My preferences don't result in bastardy. For many black women, it does. We have a near 80% black bastardy rate in the United States. And often, black women who are baby mamas, 60% of the time, they have more than one baby daddy. If it was just a question of preferences or just a question of rolling in the hay, then you'd be right. This would come down to purely personal issues, but it's not personal. It's a nearly 80% bastardy rate. And that does concern me. Why? Because many of these same black women will then call upon black men like me to clean up the mess, mentor their kids, clean up and defend the community, protect black women collectively. But they weren't concerned about all that when they were jumping up and down on that incompetent black male dick. They didn't seek my counsel on the matter. Why should it be my responsibility now?
Okay, so I hear what you're saying about that. Now, in terms of like this issue of so-called, bastard children, I don't really like using that term, but
Why not?
I understand why people use that, because
Why not?
I don't believe in like tarnishing or labeling children who had no say
How's it
in
tarnished?
their birth. But
How's it
anyway,
tarnished?
but I want to get to this question real
Whoa,
quick.
no, wait a minute. This is very important, New Possibilities, because a lot of times people that get in on this Pookie and Ray Ray debate want to get away from that. Is the central piece of my argument. The reason why I make a stink about all this is because of the black bastardy rate. And we can't even agree as black people that as a general proposition, bastardy is bad. We can't even say it. That says something, but we can go ahead and read the so-called lames and cornballs, the riot act. We can blame the victim.
Yeah, I mean,
I find that fascinating.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I mean, I get what you're saying. I do, obviously, I think that children are better raised in a nuclear family with, the father and the mother and all that kind of stuff. I think that that's the ideal situation. My only thing was like, I don't believe in labeling and, bad mouthing children. I understand what you're saying though, and I get that. But I want to get to this point about the so-called bastards that you're talking about. It takes both, the man and the woman to have these children out of wedlock. So why is most of the onus being placed on the black woman? And, the second part is this, like, it's not only the Pookie and Ray Ray type of characters that are having children out of wedlock. I mean, there are plenty of educated black men or black men that are working class people that aren't involved in, that kind of life, a criminal type of lifestyle or trifling lifestyle that happen to have kids out of wedlock. So why place all the burden on the black woman, and why blame this completely on Pookie and Ray Ray when it's a larger situation than that?
Well, number one, according to the CDC, actually it isn't. About roughly 27% of black men overall are baby daddies. 51% of black men are single and childless. So there's that. On the black female side is a much larger percentage of black women who are baby mamas.
But
So we
who's giving
have
birth to their kids though? Like
a
some they're having sexual relations with a black man more likely than not. And a lot of these black men do not fit the so-called Pookie and Ray Ray stereotype. There are plenty of educated men and hard working class men that have children out of wedlock. So why blame just the Pookies and Ray Rays, and why put most of the burden on the
much
black?
larger percent. Number two, are being held responsible by the born and who is not. Therefore, they
You broke
bear
up
the
for a second. So
responsibility.
you broke up for a second. Can you repeat what you said?
Yes, I said black women, like all women, buy into the argument of my body, my choice. Therefore, it's black women who make the final decision as to which babies get born and which do not. Therefore, the onus is rightly on them.
Right, but I mean, I understand that, but they didn't conceive of the child on their own. Like there was a guy involved. Like I mean, just basic reproduction says that it takes two people. So both people bear some kind of responsibility. Like even if you say, the woman has the right to choose and all that kind of stuff, that child wouldn't be in the world if it wasn't for a man being involved at some point or another. So I just, question when people place the heavy burden on, on the black woman's back instead of like seeing it as a collective community type of responsibility instead of just like solely. Of course, the black woman should be held accountable, but you also got to hold the man accountable as well.
Well, they are being held accountable. They're being held accountable at the state, the local, state, and federal level with regard to child support enforcement laws. They are being held accountable. And yes, it's true. It takes two to conceive a baby, but it only takes one to give birth, and that's the black woman. In this case, she doesn't even need that black male father's permission or consent or awareness. She can go and have the baby completely unbeknownst to him. She is in the driver's seat when it comes to giving birth. Therefore, she rightly bears the responsibility and the decision of bringing bastards into the world.
Okay, so I hear your position. So let me ask you this: like, what do you hope to accomplish through your commentary? Because obviously, all the countless videos you've done, the podcast and all that kind of stuff isn't changing the behavior that you complain about. So what is your goal? Like, what is your objective in constantly talking about these women that aren't doing what you think they should be doing?
Well, I mean, to ask that question is to answer it. What has been the purpose of black women talking the way that they have in various media, black and white, over more than 30 years? I mean, have they changed the way black men act? I don't think so. I think the purpose for me is to give voice to my side of the debate, which has been largely ignored and marginalized, to make money. I see nothing wrong with that. And to force a real, actual conversation between black men and black women. And I think I've agreed. I think I've achieved all my goals. If my visit to my personal banker today is anything to go by. Thank you.
All right, so you just want to have a dialogue, even though it doesn't affect any kind of change in society. You just like to talk about these issues and have people talking about them and thinking about them.
Well, if there's going to be any hope for change, there's got to be dialogue.
So yeah, so I was going over your letter to Perkins, and in that letter you were complaining about like all these different venues of women basically haranguing black men. So can you talk a little bit about that and like, what's your view on that? Like, just go into more detail about your response to that, to what you see as black men being harangued and all that stuff, and attacked in media and social media.
Yes, on March 25th, if I recall, Robert Perkins, who himself has a rather colorful past and present, that's another subject for another video, did a video presentation wherein which he exhorted the supposed lames and cornballs into not trying to guilt and shame black women into desiring them. I got word of that video, viewed it, and then responded to Perk with this. All right, Robert Perkins, I'll take you up on your offer. But will you take me up on mine? Will you then tell the black women, of which you have quite a few that listen to your show, to stop guilting black men like me into doing for their community, into giving them protection when guys like you should be, into mentoring their kids? I'm willing to take the deal if he would, and I called it the Great Pookie and Ray Ray Compromise. Of course, he never responded.
Right. So I know about that part. Like that's where I was going to ask you about like what started this whole debate with you and Robert Perkins, and what's this compromise? You've already explained that, but I wanted to go into like you were criticizing like Essence and Oprah and Ebony for basically disparaging black men, and in your letter to Perkins, you went into that. Could you talk a little bit more about that and like the whole manosphere and how you all responded to that situation?
Yes. Well, like I said earlier, the whole point of Obsidian Radio was to act as a response to Oprah, Madame Noir, The Grapevine, and so on. These are the mouthpieces for black women and their arguments, and I'm just responding to what they have to say from my own perspective. And quite a few black men agree with me. Every day on my show, I average 500 plus live listeners in morning drive radio. So that tells me that that's quite a bit, and that's what I do. And it's easy to have a monologue, much more difficult to have an actual dialogue.
Right. Yeah. So I wanted to ask you about this compromise. Now you laid it out, basically said what it was all about and stuff like that. Um, the first thing I want to ask you is this: like, you responded to what he said. Like, he was basically saying that you all were like trying to shame black women into being with cornballs and lames and stuff like that. What can you tell the people? Like, what is your response to that assertion? Because people can get that impression, like when they're watching your videos, like someone that's listening to it could get the impression that basically you're shaming these women for not being with guys like you, or even guys like me. So, like,
they would be right. They should be shamed for not getting with guys like me. If they were guys like me, we wouldn't have this conversation right now. So they should be shamed.
Why should they be shamed? Like, why should somebody be shamed into being with somebody? And do you not?
Well, because
like, are you concerned about like how that makes you look, like to be shaming somebody into desiring you? Like when somebody should naturally have a desire to be with you instead of being forced, basically, and shamed.
Would be nothing to talk about. Wouldn't have anything to talk about.
Oh, go ahead. What did you say?
I said black women themselves wouldn't have anything to talk about. They're the ones who are complaining about these men ain't responsible. They're not taking care of their responsibilities. They lack ambition. They don't have money. This, that, the other. If they got guys like me, there wouldn't be any problem. So they need to be shamed.
I mean, I'm just kind of speechless with that response. So you think it's acceptable to like shame women for not being with a guy like you? Like you think that's the best approach?
Yes.
I mean, and you're saying it because they complain about what these other guys are doing. Like, how does their complaints about these other guys affect you? I mean, you hear it all the time, like in the black manosphere, or even with a Tommy Sotomayor or whatever. When they criticize black women, they say, well, if it doesn't apply, let it fly. So why isn't it you can't have that same kind of attitude when it comes to these black women that had these critical comments about Pookie and Ray Ray? If you know you're not a Pookie and Ray Ray, why are you concerned about them complaining about Pookie and Ray Ray?
I would have nothing to say if those black women were talking, but if they use their own terms and say, we're not talking about all black men, We're only talking about the shiftless, good for nothing, ain't shit black men that we let screw up our lives, that we sucked and fucked and reproduced with. You hear nothing from me. But black women don't do that. They say all black men ain't shit. And then that brings in me. Now I got to say something. Now I got to speak to it. If they were saying the black men that are the noodlebacks, the baby Hueys, the incompetents, the Pookies, the Madden Kings, the fuck boys, you would hear nothing from me.
But I mean, you do have a lot of them that say, well, I'm not talking about, I mean, they do the same, they run the same games that some of the guys in the manosphere run. They say, well, I'm not talking about all, this is some black men. They use those kind of disclaimers as well. So,
such as?
I mean, just like that, like there are people that say that kind of stuff. They say, well, I'm not talking, like even, for instance, somebody like a Cynthia G, she'll say, even though like I think she's full of crap. I mean,
exactly. You can't
saying,
even say it with a straight face because you know it's a bunch of crap.
She will try to throw out that disclaimer saying she's not talking about all black. I mean, my issue with her, she goes after everybody. She hates the Pookie and the Ray Rays, the educated guys, everybody. Exactly. So I can't take her seriously, but you do have people.
The fact that you can't even say it with a straight face says it all. I mean, if we're going to use Cynthia G as a kind of yardstick, if we're going to use her as a kind of yardstick, then it's clear.
Hold on one second. I'll just say this, man. Like, you do have them throw out those disclaimers. So, like, for the people that actually do throw out disclaimers, like, why take issue with that? Like, if it doesn't apply to you, why be stressed out about, or like even like put your energy into something that doesn't apply to you?
Right. So again, black women have been, I mean, listen, if you're a black man, especially of a certain age, you and I, you've heard this so many times. Black men ain't shit. And I just got tired of it. I got tired of hearing it, and I decided to do something about it. And it's become a very popular show in its own right here on YouTube and elsewhere. I got people all around the world that listen to my show 9 a.m. Monday through Friday. So it's clearly resonating with a lot of black men and some black women. We all know what the deal is here. I say it's time that we brought the fight back to them and make them, admit that the black men that they chose, nobody forced them, they weren't raped, they chose incompetent, irresponsible, immature black men. And now they must deal with the consequences, whatever that may be, and leave the good, competent black men alone. That was the basis of the Pookie and Ray Ray Great Compromise.
All right. So
I'll do what Perkins asks and ask the brothers to leave the sisters alone if he will tell the sisters, leave the lames and cornballs alone. You chose ain't shit black men. You made your bed. You got to lie in it. Fair enough?
All right. So, yeah, I'm familiar with your compromise and everything, but I want to let everybody know, real quick, that the format of this particular conversation is an interview. It's not a debate. So for those people who are saying, well, you should go after him for this or that, you should, question, challenge his viewpoints more. This is more of a dialogue for, to ask questions and stuff like that. It's not a debate. We've done the debate thing before. I just wanted to interview him to get his viewpoints on this particular issue. Shout out to Big Game for your donation. He said, making shaming great again. But I wanted to ask you a little bit more about this compromise. So basically you said that black women shouldn't complain about black men not being providers and protectors if they want black men to stop complaining about Pookie and Ray Ray. So let me get into this. Like, do you think the defense of black women should be dependent upon like a exchange of sexual favors or whatever? So you're only willing to defend a woman are you only willing to defend a woman that you're dating or you're in a relationship with? Do you think that should be the mindset of black men? Like if we see something going on, like a white racist attacking a black woman, we should sit back and chill because it's not our woman and stuff like that. What's your whole perspective when it comes to protecting and providing for women in our community?
Well, my position, I can't speak for all black men. I can only speak for myself.
Right,
If
for
we ain't
yourself.
fucking,
That's all we're asking about.
if we ain't fucking, you gets nothing.
So if you saw some racist guys about to lynch a black woman, you wouldn't do anything. You would just chill, just mind your own business, and walk the other way.
Pretty much, Dionne Warwick said it best. Her and Burt back in the '60s. Walk on by.
So if that was your daughter or something being attacked, you would say, well, that's cool. Those guys. I mean, I know you don't have it. I don't think you have any kids. But if that was your mother or some other woman, there was a relative, and there was another guy that had the opportunity to defend your loved one, you would say, well, he should just chill and let it, just walk on by like that. You would still take that same type of attitude.
My mom had a hell of a protector in my father, who was known for carrying 238 snub-nosed pistols among other weapons. My grandmother had a heck of a protector in her husband, who, like my dad, were wartime Marines. He had his own personal arsenal. Two of my three sisters are married with superlative and competent black men who are very competent at protecting their wives, my sisters. So these are not concerns of mine. Let me reiterate my position with regard to the idea that black women deserve group collective protection for black men. I say to black women who say that, then I also say that black men deserve collective pussy, and you guys can bend over first, and you're doing it for the community.
So I mean, you mentioned these relatives, and I'm not going to get into like some of you. I mean, your commentary speak for itself, but I'll say this: like for the relatives that you mentioned that have these strong men to protect them and provide for them and all that kind of stuff, that's well and good. Like when that man is present, but if that man is not there and it's some other man is there witnessing some act of violence against your loved one, are you going to say that those guys should just chill and walk on by under those circumstances when they have the means to protect your loved one, and simply because they're not getting sexual favors or they're not in a relationship with that person, you're saying that they should turn a blind eye, just like those people turned a blind eye when they came up in Emmett Till's house and took him out and lynched that brother? Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is what 757 prime time in the chat room saying. Only single bitter women complain about not being protected. My mom didn't complain about it. My grandmom didn't complain about it. My sisters didn't complain about it. And the reason why is because they had competent black men as mates. So the black women who constantly complain, like the Feminista Joneses, the Cynthia G's, the Paris Milans, what they need to do is get a competent black man before they're walled out, stalled out, stretched out, cellulite out, broke, mentally deranged by messing around with incompetent baby Huey black men.
So now this brings me to this next question that I was going to ask you about, and that's this issue of like the black manosphere, for instance. Like you all have all this energy, like in all this venom and fight, and readiness to argue when it comes to black women, but a lot of times I don't see that you all have that same kind of fight against white racism, white police brutality, and just the white man in general. Like why is that? Like why is it that you all find yourselves not having that same kind of fight against the larger system, racism that we see every day? We see examples of it every day, whether we're talking about the constant police brutality stories that we hear about. Like there was recently a video that was released where another black young person is being attacked by the police. Why isn't it that you don't have that kind of fight? And then often, like a lot of the guys in the manosphere defend white racists like Donald Trump, who's made repeatedly racist statements and has supported racist policies. So can you explain that to the people? Like, why don't you all have that same kind of fight for the white man that you have for the black woman?
Because more often than not, personally, I don't have any problems with white men. Usually the problems that they have are with mouthy black women. And like we saw in Deep Ellum, Dallas, Texas, where oftentimes black women are where they don't have no business being out at that time of night, giving all these white men grief. And therefore, as far as I'm concerned, they made their bed hard, and now they got to lay in it hard.
So even like that girl that was at the mall, like, and the guy, punched and all that kind of stuff. You're fine with that. You're okay with that. You're okay with, for instance, the police officer that was restraining a young teenage girl in a bathing suit at a pool party, or the situation where you had this cop throw a girl across the classroom or whatever. You're okay with that kind of stuff. You're fine with that. You don't have any complaints or anything to say about that kind of stuff.
The only thing I have to say is that this is what happens when you have an 80% black bastardy rate. More dads, less crime. That's the great philosopher Larry Elder. I agree
Well, I
with
mean,
that.
in a lot of these situations, no crime is being committed. The kids that are victimized by these police have not been convicted of anything. They are not convicted of anything. In fact, they are the victims. So why is it? I mean, and when the police decide to attack somebody, they're not asking them if they were born in a single parent household or not. So, like, how do you make these kind of distinctions? Like, why do you say, well, first of all, assume that they're in a single parent household. Second, basically turn a blind eye to that type of brutality and racism, but yet you're so animated when it comes to these women issues and these women not desiring guys like you.
Because they keep making, to answer the last question first, because black women for whom it applies keep making everybody else's life miserable. White men don't make my life miserable. And again, for most black women who have competent black men as mates, this isn't an issue. It's only an issue for mouthy, bitchy, incorrigible black women and the bastards that they whelp. And I'm not here to be the bastard whisperer. I'm not here to be the big bailout for the baby mamas. That's on them.
Now, in your letter to Perkins, I think it was in your letter or in your commentary, you were talking about like how black women are trying to guilt successful black men into taking, to being there for them and stuff like that. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more? Like, explain your position on that.
Well, like I said, I mean, the letter pretty much breaks down my position and my offer.
Yeah, this is for the, obviously it's for the people that haven't like read your letter and, aren't familiar with your content. So if you could like go into it for their sake.
Yeah. Well, essentially, by the way, you can see my letter over on my Patreon page. And it's available to the public. If anybody wants a copy, just hit me up, theobsidianfiles@gmail.com. I'll be happy to give you a copy. Essentially what it does is it just lets Rob know how the Pookie and Ray Ray debate actually got started, what the issues actually are, and my offer to, give him what he wants if he be willing to give me what I want. I'm tired of these black women after getting with black men like him, screwing their lives over, demanding that black men like me clean up the mess. I don't think that's fair. I don't think we should be shamed and cajoled into that. I don't think we should have to be dragooned into being community eunuchs. They stop, we stop.
All right. So can you, I heard you use that term on your show and all that kind of stuff. Like, what do you mean by community eunuchs? I guess you're saying they're not getting sex, but
That's
they
right.
do all this stuff for the community. I guess that's your point when you use that term, community.
That's
eunuch.
right. That's
so,
right.
So
Go
you're
ahead.
basically saying that if you're not getting sex with these women, you shouldn't have any kind of responsibility for them.
That's right. I only have responsibility for the women bent over my couch. That's it.
So you don't see yourself as having any kind of community responsibility at all. You just see yourself as being solely responsible for the woman that you happen to be having sex with at the time.
That's right.
So you don't care like about the violence that we see in our community, the failing schools, the police brutality, the disproportionate poverty, the higher unemployment rates in Black communities, the failing schools and, economic disparities. None of that stuff matters to you. You're only concerned about like the individual woman that you're having sex. Is that right? Is that what you're saying?
That's right. That's correct.
So how do you expect the community to improve when you're not engaged in the community, when you're like so disengaged and all you do is complain about what women are doing and who they choose to date and all that kind of stuff?
Well, black women start choosing black men like me, I'd have nothing to talk about. They could put me out of business right now. Choose black men like me, put me out of business.
Now, I noticed in your letter you were talking about like you criticize women for choosing people based on their looks and everything, just based, that being that first factor and all that kind of stuff. But then you talk about how women are basically judged primarily on how they look or if they're beautiful or not. And men are basically judged on their success and all that kind of stuff.
That's right.
And obviously you are concerned about what a woman looks like. That's like
Absolutely.
one of the main things you talk about a lot. So how is it that you can have this double standard, like where you place looks at a high level, but then you criticize black women for doing the same thing?
That's right. Well, first of all, black men and black women and men and women are different, but only in Black America do we attempt to reject this idea. The men are to be effective and the women are to be attractive, but it's completely turned around in Black America. Black America, the men are to be more attractive than the women, and the women are the ones that are supposed to be effective. No wonder we have such a basket case, clockwork orange type of situation in Black America that's completely opposite of what goes on in white America. And then we wonder why things don't work. The men are to be effective. The women are to be attractive.
So you reduce the woman down to just her looks. Like you're not concerned about like her character, her personality, her intelligence, her abilities, her skills, her education. All of that's out the window. All you're concerned about is like how she looks and stuff. That's your primary concern, or that's the primary thing that a woman brings to the table in your mind. Is that?
That's right. The primary. It's not that other things aren't important. They just rank less importance than attractiveness. That's number one. Just like with a man outside of Black America, it's the most important thing about him is his effectiveness. It's only in Black America where his attractiveness matters more than his effectiveness. And look at the results. The results are getting the brakes beat off your ass down in Deep Ellum. The results are 80% bastardy rate. The results are Cynthia G calling her baby daddy a dusty beta male.
All right, so yeah, I just find it like hypocritical for you to just to share my view. Like I think that it's hypocritical to judge women for like picking up mates primarily based on their looks, and then you turn around and basically do the same thing that you're criticizing the women for. So that's one thing. But your point about like men being effective and all that kind of stuff, like why can't a woman also consider other fact? Like why should it just be based solely on like who's effective and who's not? And then also, like, I mean, a lot of women of other races obviously factor in physical attraction. They don't just go ahead and get with the geek that's at MIT or whatever just because he's smart or and things like that. They are attracted to certain people and they gravitate towards men that they're attracted to. Now, I understand your point about like them not putting looks as the first priority or whatever, but let's not pretend like Black women are the only women that consider attractiveness as like one of the main things that drives whether or not they're going to be in a relationship with somebody.
Well, actually, that's not true. And again, I was at Easter Sunday brunch yesterday, and the guys came right out of central casting of what's that third rock from the sun? What's that show? That dork show. These guys, Dockers, polo shirts, dorks, all, and their wives, Easter Sunday best, very attractive. And that's right in line with that Essence magazine article.
So you're gonna make
only in Black America do Black women put attractiveness, sexiness, charisma over top of earning potential, character, integrity, intelligence, kindness, willingness to commit, generosity, and then they wonder why they have to tell their girlfriend in private on the down low, I thought he was this. I didn't know he was going to do this. He's a dusty beta male. White women don't do that. Black women do. The numbers bear it out. 80% black bastardy rate. White women don't have that. Black women do. Why? Because black women choose different traits in mates than white women. And I don't even know why that's such a scandalous statement to make. Why can't black women just own the fact for those type of traits and then be cool with that type of result? So that means that instead of being in a nice area of town enjoying Easter Sunday brunch, they're online bitching about the incompetent black men they chose as mates. Compare and contrast.
Right. I mean, so the one thing that I'll say about that, like in response to your answer, like, I mean, you can't judge black women based on a single event that you attended where you saw, like, you know, some white women with some dorks or whatever. I mean, you know, I think that that's a stretch. And then, like, even to judge black women based on, you know, a particular matchmaker or, you know, counselor or whatever, and their interactions with a small pool in the black community, you know, I think that that's a stretch. That's a logical stretch. And then also another stretch is going from saying that, you know, these women consider looks first, going from that to saying, well, they choose, you know, that's the reason why they have children outside of wedlock. You know, I think that that's a logical, you know, the illogical type of leap to a conclusion. So, I mean, just because somebody is more, you know, like into looks and that's the first thing that they consider, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to have, you know, quote unquote bastard children and everything. So that's the only thing. Yeah, but it's what you suggested, because you're saying, well, these black women, you know, they're focused on looks, and then you went on to say, well, we had this high out of wedlock birth situation in the black community. You were essentially suggesting that there was some kind of link between.
Well, what I'm suggesting, as the article in Essence Magazine with two black female matchmakers of over 20 years experience between the two of them, are saying black women place character and integrity last and physical attributes first. And then they wonder why their relationships, marriages, etc., go down in flames. I mean, I don't know what else to say out of that. And it's clear to me that black women as a group do that. Not all black women. And let me be clear about something else. Black women, as they age, figure this out. The problem becomes, why should a black man like me, who did the right thing all his life, why should I just overlook her bastard kids, her fucked up mating history, her debt, her stretched out body? Why should I overlook all of that? Why? Give me a good reason why, other than I'm black, she black, my mama black. Go.
Yeah, I'll let the people respond to that in the comment section and all that kind of stuff. But I wanted to ask you, like, you know, a couple of questions. Like, first of all, like, do you think you can build the black well, I mean, you're not even concerned about building the black community, obviously, from what you've been saying, but do you think that the black community can be improved without the black woman?
In what now?
Do you think you can build a black community without the black woman, basically?
Yes.
How can you do that without the black woman?
Because it's still black men, and they can still make black kids. Barack Obama's black.
So you're saying that black men just intermarry with non-black women, they could create black, you know, quote unquote black children, even though those children are biracial?
Yes, Barack Obama's black.
And you're saying based on that, you know, you can build a community?
Yes. If he can become president of the United States and leader of the free world twice, yes.
But in that situation, like eventually the community wouldn't even be black. Like if you got, biracial kids, and we know that a lot of times biracial children, marry outside of the race, especially if they got a father that's providing that role model, that example to marry outside of the race. So it's like in that type of scenario, you eventually end up with a community that's not black as we know it. Like it's not going to be a genuine black community. So I don't really understand like how you could say that you can build a black community without a black woman there. Like the
What's
black
wrong with
woman.
that? That'll be an improvement. I mean, black women have yet to produce a black president, but a white woman did. That would be an improvement.
How could you say that like being with a white woman would be some improvement in the black community? Like what?
Well,
How? What's
again,
the thought
I'm just
process,
telling you a fact. A white woman produced a black president. A black woman has yet to do that. So that would be an improvement based on that track record.
I mean, we know, like, just in history, like people that are biracial often are the first within the black community just because the larger white society is more accepting of somebody that has white parents. Like, because Barack Obama could point to his white mother and his white grandparents, that made him more relatable. And the fact that he was of a lighter hue, that also made him more relatable to the white populace, especially this being a black man raised in Hawaii, not raised in a predominantly black environment. That's what made him acceptable. I mean, there have been plenty of black elected officials that have a black mother that, that have become like congressmen or governors even, or even senators. So I think that argument about like what the black woman is capable of producing just on its face doesn't really make sense, because it's not about like a white woman producing a better black man. You have to look at the larger societal context where racism still plays a role, where there is still a light skin preference and a preference for biracials. I mean, if you look at the first black person that did this and that, often they are these biracial black people or people that are racially ambiguous. So, I mean, basically, you're suggesting that a white woman would make a better mate and a better mother to a black child than a black woman would. Like,
Well, yes, I would say that. Not only would I say that, but let me say also that I find it interesting that anytime we want to examine the fuckery of black women and by extension the black men they choose, we got to look at the root causes. We got to go back to slavery, Chicken George, Kunta Kinte. We got to look at all the different factors. But then when it comes time to examine the so-called lames and cornballs, we only want to look at their personal demons, their personal peccadillos, their real motivations. We ain't got to look at no outer societal forces then. I just find that fascinating.
yeah, so it's not like, I'm not saying that, you got to look at my only point was with respect to this Barack Obama thing, this Barack Obama example that you made. And, I think that, like, I mean, I'll let the people comment. I won't go into my views about, some of the things that you said. Um, but let me ask you this. Like, somebody just had a general question, and since they raised this to me, and it's kind of like off topic, but somebody asked this question, so I'm gonna raise it now. They basically wanted to know, like, what is your position on reparations? What do you think about reparations? What do you think about this ADOS movement? I don't know if you're familiar with what that's about, but what are your views on that?
I think it's not likely to happen because we have so much bastardy. We can't even trace the bloodlines because it's all mixed up, because we got all these black bastards and baby mamas whooping them out like bitches, having them in litters. So how are we going to determine who's actually a descendant of slaves when we can't even figure out who the baby daddy is, what line he came from? All this bastardy will mess up the reparations, which would actually, be something. But we got too much bastardy.
But I mean, well, I won't get into I'm gonna try to restrain by not getting into what I think. I'll let the people respond. Um, there was one other thing that I wanted to ask you. Just bear with me 1 second. So let me see. I'm going to look in the chat room to see if anyone else has any questions. I want to thank you for participating in this hangout.
Oh
I
man, no
really
problem. I love
appreciate
it.
it. Just bear with me a second. Yeah, this is a good question that somebody asked. Like, shout out to Queen Dove. She asked, why do you think those women choose the Pookies and Ray Rays, basically? Like, I mean, you mentioned looks, like that was one thing that but a lot of these Pookies and Ray Rays, they're not necessarily like, the quote unquote handsome guy that person, that a person thinks of when they think of handsome. So why do you think, according to you, that Black women tend to gravitate towards the Pookies and Ray Rays?
Control.
Can you explain that a little bit deeper?
Yes.
Like, what do you
Competent
mean by
Black
that?
men can't be controlled.
Yeah, and I understand that point to a degree. Like, I hear what you're saying, because like if somebody's not in a position to like be independent on their own, like a lot of times, the people that fit that Pookie and Ray Ray type of image are in a dependent type of situation. Like some of these guys like live in the woman's house, depend on the woman for transportation and stuff like that. So I get that to a degree, but can you like just like break that down, like talk about the control factor and what you exactly mean
Yes.
when you're
A
saying
lot
that?
of Black women are addicted to control, and a lot of Black men, in this case, those characterized as Pookie and Ray Ray, are addicted to being infantile mama's boys, and they're attracted to each other. And but eventually it wears off. I mean, that's great for a short-term fix, but in the long term, it's a turn off. The Black women get very upset because they're essentially taking care of a grown child, and things eventually break down, and then all of a sudden they are, and I quote, fuck boys.
Now, one thing that I wanted to ask you about is, like, I was watching Cynthia G's video where she was talking about the educated lames not being any better from, basically her point was that the educated lames are no better than Pookie and Ray Ray. She talked about how they're not building anything either. And, she also went into the character traits and all that kind of stuff. So what are your views about that? Like, do you think it's wrong for, I mean, obviously, I just want to hear your position, but what do you think about the people that say that's elitist to be talking about Pookie and Ray Ray and looking down on them and all that kind of stuff? What's your response to that?
Well, I'll just say this. Yesterday, me and my lady was at a very upscale place for Easter Sunday brunch, and Cynthia G was on a panel on YouTube complaining about Black men ain't shit. Compare and contrast.
All right. So the other thing is like, what's your response to her thing about like how Black men are, the so-called educated lame is not building anything either. Her statement about how the educated lame lacks masculinity, and the Pookie and Ray Ray is more masculine, and is more of a resistor to the system than the educated lame. What's your response to that?
My response is that she's right. The so-called educated lames aren't building anything, but she just leaves out the part for her. They're not building anything for her. They're building things for the relatively few Black women that got their heads on straight left. And yes, they're building for white women, Asian women, Hispanic women, Persian women, Indian women, Jewish women, and etc. So she is right. We're not building anything, just not for her. See, she will never be where I can go. She will never be where I can afford to take a woman, white, Black, or otherwise, go. She will never be there. All she can do is a rearguard action of sour grapes, trying to defend and legitimate and rationalize her bad choices in mates that she says herself are dusty beta males, and can only look on in infinite rage from her perch on YouTube. Meanwhile, I can go to nice concerts, nice brunches, nice soirees, nice art events, and things of that nature. I can go and see the Eiffel Tower. She'll never be able to do that. Never.
Well, let's see. Just bear with me a second. I'm trying to see if there are any other questions from the chat room or comments that I want to highlight.
So I understand her perpetual butthurt. I feel her pain.
Just bear with me 1 second. I'm just trying to make sure there are no other questions in the chat room. Yeah, so well, somebody basically made this comment. They said, that they hear what you're saying. They say, why self-sacrifice when there is no real incentive to save an ungrateful people? And they said, you're not Jesus. And they're just affirming what you have already said, basically. Yeah, let me go. Somebody made a super chat donations. I want to shout out them before I. Yeah, so did you have anything else that you wanted to say before we close out? I know.
Oh, no, I just want to thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. We need to do this more often.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it was a good dialogue, a good chance for you to express your views, even though you always express your views on your own channel, but it's a good thing for people to actually hear what your viewpoints are. Obviously I disagree with a lot of things that you said, but it's great to have this dialogue. Since I did a couple of videos on this subject, because, it's something that you have been one of the main people that raised this issue of Pookie and Ray Ray. So I said, why not have you on here to talk about this? And I appreciate you for taking out time from your schedule to have this hangout to talk about these issues. And I look forward to the further dialogue that we have and that the people in the comments section have as well.
Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it. And thanks everybody for listening, even those self-described Pookies and the manlit black women who love them. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Peace.
All right, peace.